Welcome back to Barefoot Sports, and it's time to talk about Australia's game. That's what we're calling AFL in 2012, and we're looking forward to previewing the season with this deadly fellow who's joining us tonight on Barefoot Sports. He's the National Community Engagement Manager. He's also a former St Kilda man who also was assistant coach at St Kilda and the Bulldogs. And we welcome here tonight, it's Jason Mifsud. How are you, brother?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Mate, great to have you here on the program. It's been a huge week in AFL, especially for yourself personally. A lot of things are going on at the moment, including some comments that have been made by people in the game of AFL. But first of all, we're going to talk about the incidents and what we are talking about, comments that are made by various people in the game. First one I want to talk to you about is Paul Roos and James Hird, two legends of the game of AFL. They've come out in commentary talking about the lack of endurance, if you like, of Indigenous players, which may lead to a trouble of them being recruited.
Yeah, I mean, it was disturbing at the time, and I think in context they're trying to exaggerate a point around the new 2-and-2 substitute rule, and probably in essence chose the wrong example. But I guess the challenge for us is the negative stereotyping that eventuated from that. I mean, there's some underlying sort of current within the industry at the moment in regards to drafting Indigenous players, and we just don't need those factually incorrect statements permeating throughout the industry to give people other reasons not to draft our players. So I think it's really important to be factual, be very objective, and refer to the statistics which tell us that Indigenous players don't lack endurance in general.
Another issue that's came up very recently is the story around Liam Jarrah, who's the Melbourne Demons player, who I guess the discussion really is around the difference between customary law, LORE, versus modern law in today's society, where there's been, I guess, a few issues around what he's doing in his life and how that's affecting his AFL career. What's the AFL stance on all this?
I think we're like the rest of the community. We're trying to come to terms as a code, as the country is, in regards to the conflict between customary law and tradition and Western law, LORE versus LAW. I seen a disturbing statistic come out of the Social Justice Commission last week, where 80% of Indigenous people in prison are in prison for crimes against other Indigenous people. And that's a horrific statistic for us as a community, but I think it highlights that there is absolute a cultural dynamic at play there that we need to continually educate our own communities about in terms of the behaviours from customary law to Western law. And our elders have got a really strong role in that, as we would know. But it's a generational thing in regards to reversing that trend and providing a level of education across all communities.
So when we look at the issues between initiated men coming to the game who are dealing with customary law issues, comments made by commentators, current and ex-coaches in the game about the endurance of our players, that makes your job so tough in order to try and recruit more Indigenous players into the game, if that's the opinion of a few learned people in the game.
Yeah, look, it's a consistent challenge, and sport is only a reflection of the broader community in a lot of ways, and the attitudes within the broader community. But there's many teachable moments in sport, and I think it's those teachable moments we need to continually look for and provide a level of education to, whether it be Indigenous people or non-Indigenous people, about how two cultures can come together and create a great platform of celebration and recognition. And sport, clearly in this country, is a significant platform from that point of view. So I think the athleticism of our players, the unique talents of our players and the dedication and selflessness of our players will continually speak for itself. But it is about that sort of bicultural education.
The other big issue that's come up recently is the issue around a conversation you've had with an AFL recruiter from the Adelaide Crows, who's a friend of yours. So what comments did he make?
Look, without going into detail, because I don't think it serves anybody now to talk about the specifics of the conversation, but I think Matt has come out and acknowledged that, there's a conversation broader than one comment that I was clearly offended by, as the colleague that was with me was offended by. But I think it's one of those scenarios I mentioned just 5 minutes ago about sport's got many teachable moments. I spoke to Matt for an hour on the phone tonight. It was a great conversation. It's still a very uneasy conversation, but ultimately you've got to have these tough conversations. Then you'd rather not have them, but ultimately they need to be exposed. Not for a callous and a retribution perspective, but from an educational perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest dilemma, and I think people have spoken why have I sat on it for sort of 4 or 5 weeks, quite clearly I had 3 clear decisions to make after I actually reconciled the impact of the conversation. One was a personal decision. You know, is it a stance I'm prepared to lose a friendship over? There's a professional decision. Is it a stance you're prepared to take as an AFL employee whose role it is to drive outcomes around Indigenous development? And then there's a cultural decision. Is it a stance that we need to continually take as a community to, at all times, at all levels, at all occasions, combat and dispute negative racial stereotyping and assimilation thinking?
Well, that certainly is an issue we need to worry about. Just quickly, Matthew Rendell, would you want him back into the AFL?
Absolutely. I think Andrew Demetriou is on record now in terms of saying, I mean, our code, and I think a lot of codes, and I heard the discussion you were having earlier in regards to sport generally gives people a second chance. But it's about education, it's about rehabilitation, and it's about support. I think it's very easy to be able to cut people off and not necessarily give them the necessary supports or level of education. And I know, speaking to Matt tonight, he's really keen to pursue that. And I'll stand with him on that. But I'll also stand by the position I've taken because it's too important not to.
Mate, for me personally, as another Indigenous person, I want to congratulate you. And I think this moment, without exaggerating too much, is up there with the Nicky Winmar moments and the Michael Long moments. So congratulations to you for your courage and well done for what you're standing up for all of our people.